Is episode 3 of the B2B pipeline growth series of LinkedIn live sessions that we've been doing. My name is Iyer, CEO here at Kwanzoo. Really pleased to have Josh Hill here with us. I did write a little bit about Josh, and so Josh, by the way, good to meet you.
Hi, glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. And I know just to give some background, Josh, maybe on folks a little bit about yourself. I did write a little bit on LinkedIn, but you've had quite a career. Most recently, I know at Ring Central, several hundred million. I think you said when you went in there, a few hundred million revenue, and grew significantly from when you were there. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a large part of the sales team and the product and timing, and I supported, the GTM operations around that growth.
Absolutely. So I think that's some amazing experience that hopefully will come to bear on some of the topics we get into here. And then the second thing, I know you're also advising the folks at Open Price, from what I understand, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Sure.
This particular episode, I think Josh, you and I discussed and agreed, we will really focus on how to fix the broken pipeline at B2B companies, all the way from mid-market companies to larger enterprises. And that certainly was the core topic. And then we were going to go about it in terms of trying to identifying the typical problems, challenges that I think, from what you said, you've seen at many of these companies, and then give our take on how you might recognize it when those problems happen, and then diagnose, and then hopefully have some solutions around it. And then sometime soon, I'll put up a slide just to kind of frame the conversation in terms of, just a way to think about things. But yeah, Josh, over to you if you want to elaborate.
Oh, sure. Well, just a bit of background. I'm a GTM operations and technology executive. I've got more than 20 years of experience at the intersection of B2B marketing, sales, and technology. And what I do is I build GTM platforms that scale, and I do that in partnership with product, sales, and marketing. And as you mentioned, I did that at Ring Central, and I've done that in many other companies, working on sales-led PLG, as well as ABM enterprise motion build-outs. So a lot of stories, a lot of interesting system challenges, but also business challenges.
Right, for sure. And so if you think about, so how about, Josh, how about we try to tackle it this way? Obviously, all these B2B companies, first order of business for the board and the leadership is, okay, they want to hit certain revenue goals, right, but by quarter. And then that usually translates into working backwards into certain pipeline goals that they need to get to, again, right, that they need to hit. How would you frame, just one level down from there? I know you had a few quick points to make about the typical areas where you've seen challenges at these companies, be it around pipeline, be it around leads, be it around down funnel, further back, the kind of issues you've seen across sales and marketing.
Yeah, well, every B2B company wants revenue. They want pipe, and there are all sorts of reasons that could fluctuate or not hit your targets, right? To me, this always comes back to understanding the company and the product strategy. What is that business journey you want to have or take people on, both internally as well as with your customers? Right. Are people on board? Do you have the right process defined, and do they understand that? And lastly, does the infrastructure or the systems follow that desired process, that desired business journey? There's all sorts of reasons people can get misaligned, but often, what I see is that, the strategy, the salespeople will get out in front of systems or even marketing team, and they will come back and look at, hey, we're not hitting certain goals, and maybe the leads aren't ready, maybe the lead routing doesn't seem to be working right? Is the ICP accurate? Or is there some sort of misalignment? And the answer is that, sure, there can be misalignment. And I think the question a lot of people have asked themselves, both at the executive level and even the operations level, is, are we following the business requirements and the strategy? Right? Are teams getting out ahead of each other or behind each other? And how do we work together to align all of those goals, those dashboards, those reports, and make the system actually do what we anticipate or wanted?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the next thing, maybe, Josh, let me do this is I know you had this very interesting framing and you wanted to kind of approach it this way, which is uh, we can start diving into and discussing elements around the strategy first, like GTM strategy
Sure.
and what you've seen as challenges, problems, issues at the strategy level. And then from then, I know we can then talk about people, because you have to have people to support the execution around the strategy, the right kind of people with the right kind of skills. And from there, obviously, to me, the next logical thing is process, meaning, do you have the right kind of processes in place? Because the process can be automated, obviously, to make it more efficient, more effective, and then you can still get by in some cases because it's not automated, but it's more manual. And then the systems and tools to support that whole thing. And then I think I probably missed one thing between strategy and people, which is, as you mentioned, the business journey, buyer journey, the external customer prospect buyer journey, and then from the internal, there's the business journey in terms of how things need to get done, right, across your staff, across your people. So why don't we tackle that one at a time, and then I will just put up one visual, because I just want to put this up more as a way to think about the broad framing across these elements. So you'll see some, hopefully the right kind of, memory joggers, if you will, right, for folks listening in. So let me share my screen here, and we can hopefully start the dialogue around this visual here, Josh. So I'm going to go click here, click share. And Josh, this visual, as I said, is just to represent at a high level basically the pipeline development process at B2B companies. And without getting into the weeds, right, we're trying to call out the folks involved, all the way from some key players on the marketing side to folks, all the key folks on the sales side, all the way to C-level and executive leadership at the top, right? And then without getting into specific tools and parts and pieces, right? Just what we have typically seen are core infrastructure systems, if you will, right, at B2B companies, and some of the dashboarding and reporting and insights kind of capabilities that are required, with some things in the bottom, as you can see, right, which is, in order to drive pipelines, some core elements that you tend to have to bring into the mix. But Josh, yeah, maybe you can comment on this visual first, if you think this would be a good representation, if you think we might want to, maybe it's missing some elements more on the expansion side, right, upsell, cross-sell side, which is further downstream, if you will, right? But maybe you can tee off with this first, and then let's get into the first component, right, around GTM strategy. Over to you.
Yeah, I think what we have here is a good representation of a lot of the things you need to consider in building out the strategy, and then building out that process and the systems that would support that, right? So when we start at the top, when we think about the strategy, what the executives agree on, what are those outcomes that they're looking at, what's going to really drive the business forward,
Right.
And having good requirements around those dashboards, right? Whether, if you haven't built already, great. If you need to evolve them, good mock-ups for what that should look like, so that the analytics team, the data teams can support that and decide, okay, well, if we need a funnel by segment with certain cohort analysis, okay, well, we can capture that data, and let's make sure we're doing that from the campaign and the product, both at the person and the account level, to support whatever that should look like. I can make that data show up any way you want it to, as long as I understand what the goal is, right?
Right.
Now, these are all the systems and teams you would typically have across the funnel. And those should all be working together, as you note here, in a master database, some sort of data warehouse where you can draw into those reporting systems to show those dashboards. Now, I think the key part here is that everyone has to be looking at the right dashboards, and the right dashboards are whatever you agree on. But you can't look at your own report and then say, well, things aren't working when everyone else is looking at this other report that we agreed on, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you start to see these disconnects in the processes. And people start to say things like, oh, well, systems are broken, or the process is broken, or we're drying up in pipeline, except that it turns out that someone's looking at a report by territory instead of by industry, or whatever it is they created to help them manage on a more tactical level. And those kinds of disconnects have to be addressed. Otherwise, you get these narratives where everyone thinks it's broken, or maybe the pipe is fine, but that report is looking at something very specific that has nothing to do with whatever the business has agreed on.
Got it. Yeah. So absolutely. So I just want to drill down on this a little bit. So when you've seen issues around strategy, and let's say the outcomes don't quite align with the strategy, are there typically, here are a few things you've seen where the misalignment happens? I mean, or is it a broad range?
I mean, it's really a broad range of things,
Got
right?
it. Yep.
Like I said, it can happen with people not agreeing on the reports or the data sets they should be using, which is more common than people like to admit. But you see people talk about it on LinkedIn all the time.
Right. So if we take a step back, Josh, let me maybe take it one step. Just drill down this way, which is from strategy. The first order thing, would you say, is I've seen, I think, and certainly I think I might have seen this in some cases, which is right, just alignment on even from the board and leadership level down to the heads of the organization, right, across marketing and sales, and then on down into just a common understanding of even call it the ICP or ICP, right, definition, ICP segments by the different ways people do segmentation, onto the buying groups, buyer personas. I mean, I think obviously a more mature organization has a lot of this figured out, but the question is, businesses are always changing, new products come in, right? New solutions are being introduced. Have you seen this or experienced some of this, where the just aligning around ICPs and market segments they're going after, to mapping it to products and mapping it to sales organization, territories, teams, on and on, and having that properly documented, written up, agreed upon, and then of course from there to actually implement it, right, into all these different systems and tools.
Those are common concerns. Absolutely. Right. One is the company is growing, right? You were a startup and you just did whatever it took. And now you have to be more disciplined, or you found out that there are certain ICPs and targets that need to be better defined within the system, and have to create some sort of automation. But those kinds of roles don't get and requirements aren't getting communicated fully to everyone at the same time. So
right.
you have sales doing one thing and your marketing doing a slightly different thing, and then the systems are working as you intended them 5 years ago, or last year, or 6 months ago, but they're not supporting what the business says they want now. And that's where it's really important to keep a continual eye on that kind of change, and bring that up, and make sure, facilitate that alignment as a GTM operations pro, and make sure you're staying as close to the business as possible. Otherwise, you get these disconnects, and that can create sales drag. That can create, or even a perception of sales drag, and hey, our things are not keeping up. That's one area, right? The growth of the business. The other area, as you mentioned, is new products or new motions or some sort of other change. And that's where you really need to, executives need to communicate effectively and make sure that there is,
Got it. So
communication across all teams at the same time.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you a follow-up question, which is, what have you seen it seems to work well in terms of, if you look at these different functions involved, right? So you've got your growth and demand, you've got ABM, you've got media teams, RevOps, right, all the way to inside sales,
Hmm.
account execs, and so on. If you just look at this specific thing we just discussed, right, where have you seen ownership reside on, as you said, these core elements? You know, what are the ICP or ICPs we're going after, segments we're going after, onto the buying groups, buyer personas. One is the ownership around definitions, right, and all the key components, and then the second is, of course, the dissemination, right, of that, call it common lens, common view of what they should be going, executing on. Uh, what I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, is growth and demand? Is it RevOps? Um, is it they need to
Well,
own it together? With leadership buy-in. I mean, where have you seen it reside?
in terms of who gets to define the requirements or the ICP or the account
Yeah, who
definition.
who owns it at the end of the day? The ownership around what are we executing against? Uh, Um, yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
ultimately, the business has to own that, right? So whether it's the CRO or you know the VPs of marketing and sales together, um, these things
Got
should
it.
not be changing that often, to be honest. At a
Sure.
systems or operational level, it almost doesn't matter who owns it as long as someone owns it and they are um, making sure that it doesn't change in the system
Right.
without proper sign off.
Got it. Fair enough. So this is, I think we're getting a little bit into the specifics of GTM strategy, where it gets, we've seen one level of misalignment, right, around this for sure. Yeah. Is there another, other than this, that you've seen? Is it where companies might have challenges, issues? For example, have you seen any other function comes to mind? Is it sales enablement, meaning sales having a deep enough understanding
Um,
of what's
I
really
mean,
being
there's all
pursued?
sorts of places. Like, you definitely need with any change, whether it's a new product or a new process, or you need people's buy-in, right? And sales enablement
Sure.
function, if you have it, is helpful, and you should always be friends with them to make sure that the right training is happening. But that training is always dependent on what that strategy and those business requirements and that journey is,
Right.
right? Now, where teams can get into trouble um, with the funnel is that, like I said, one team's trying to solve for one area and trying to hit their number, and it has impacts across the funnel that they didn't anticipate. And that's where GTM operations or a process owner of some type can help identify when that's happening and bring it up to realign the teams with the business, right? So
Right.
like you have a business funnel owner across end to end, as well as some sort of process guardian who can see when things are not um, going to the agreed process and decide how to help realign teams or the system or the process so that we're capturing all that data. And you can see this in all sorts of complaints or reports that become misaligned or data spikes are all symptoms of something happening around that.
Makes sense. And where do you see these specific roles you just described, be the funnel owner, process guardians? Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I'm sure for folks listening, right, it'd be interesting to understand. Um, because I agree with you. Because in smaller companies, remember, part of what we're discussing here today is folks listening who might be looking to up, right? Let's call it up level, right, from working at companies which are startups or less than 100 million revenue, all the way to mid-sized companies, larger organizations. So I'm sure you agree, right? Roles change, roles get more segmented. Different owners live in different groups or departments. Um, some of these folks you're describing, I think of them as guys who need to, folks who need to program manage, right? Tasks across so many different people in different functions. Um, what have you seen, Josh, in terms of where do they kind of slot in the organization?
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of solutions. I don't think, some of it will depend on your particular culture, the size of the organization, the growth speed, right? Um, for whatever reason, but I think this is a good function to have. Is, GTM operations teams are closest to the systems as well as the business needs,
Got
and
it.
they can facilitate these kinds of alignment conversations to resolve issues. Now, it does place you in a difficult situation sometimes politically, but as the CMO of Outreach said yesterday, um, it's about data, not drama. So the more we can just focus on solving the business problem, looking at actual data, not telling ourselves anecdotal stories that may or may not be true before we actually understand what actually happened, right?
Got it.
I think that can, MOPS, RevOps, GTM Ops, whatever we'd like to call it, can be that facilitator of those conversations to make
Understood.
sure that these things are happening correctly.
Okay, wonderful. So I think we've touched upon strategy. We all obviously, I think now we've gotten a little bit into the people aspect. I know we talked about ICPs and buyer journeys and business journeys and so on also earlier. Um, then anything specific, Josh? The next two things I certainly want to hit on right before we, for the next few minutes is really around a process. Um, are there any key points you want to make around process and things to kind of understand or note, especially around pipeline development, delivering on revenue goals? What have you seen around in terms of process challenges over the years?
Oh, well, there's so many potential things. At a tactical level, a lot of sales teams will talk about that. How do I create an opportunity, and why is it difficult to press certain buttons?
Mm-hmm.
Definitions around what a opportunity stage is, and when do we start recording or compensating people on certain things.
Got it.
Those are all things to investigate and make sure you're supporting sales in a way that makes it, fairly easy to do their job, right? If I need
Mm-hmm.
product X and I need to start moving this meeting into a more of an opportunity and associating those people in the buying cycle, do as much as you can automatically, as well as make it clear how to help the salesperson. That's why it's important to always stay close to that process. And I think at a higher level, looking at are people moving through, or accounts moving through the funnel efficiently, and where can we um, identify accounts that are getting stuck or maybe moving too quickly. Why are those things happening, and doing that kind of analysis, but also
Mm-hmm.
doing it as dispassionately as possible, right? These are all solvable problems at the end of the day.
Got it. So a lot of process things, as you said, comes down to just a day in the life of and different folks in the organization just getting them getting whatever needs to be done in terms of their roles, and where GTM Ops, RevOps can come in and help make that happen.
Yeah, I
So
think it's important whether doing it fresh as a new company, or you're trying to resolve what are perceived to be a lot of conflicts, and to say, hey, what is the desired journey and process we actually want, and we'll worry about the system once we understand the business requirements, right? I had a saying, and I still do, right? I can make the tool do whatever you want, but do we agree on what it should do? And let's just
got it.
walk through the whole process, and
Mm-hmm.
that will resolve most questions very quickly. Maybe not, super quickly, but that's where you can realign all the teams and stop having conversations about, one-off issues, or XYZ is broken, or maybe it's not broken, but it's not doing what we expect. All right,
Sure.
well, let's talk about what we expect and make sure that we resolve all the upstream and downstream issues, and then get it done.
Makes sense. Understood. So I think then, Josh, as we kind of get through this and get to the last step. So the last step is really around, okay, so you've got your strategy figured out. You have your ICPs, hopefully the data to support it for marketing and sales in place. On to hopefully you've got the right team in place. You've got the processes mapped out. Let's talk about the last thing, which is just as important, right? Which is systems, tools, getting your hands around what do you have, what the capabilities are, what needs to get done. Um, any thoughts in that area? I mean, what have you seen there in terms of how those change as you go from smaller organizations to bigger organizations? How do you get organized, stay organized as somebody in GTM ops, RevOps? Any lessons that you've picked up over the years, right? That might be worth discussing now.
Oh, so many lessons. At a very high level, I can say that as much as you can look forward into the future about what tools are going to work for me in the next 2 to 5 years.
Got
And
it.
that's always a balance because you'll have some existing things and then you'll have some future things, and hopefully the business grows with that and you're staying ahead of that. I think, if you're lucky and you join a company that becomes very high volume, very large enterprise, those back-end tools in particular, right? That data warehouse, the data streams, the kind of intent data that you're going to use is going to change, and you get more options and you get more data, but then you have to manage it more efficiently and make sure that it's getting the right insights are getting to sales, right insights are getting to the analytics teams and the executives even more than before, because there's just so many data points, there's so many questions you could ask the data. What are the right questions? And that's really where I would start, and the systems will follow that question.
Got it. Yeah. So just a couple of points, Josh. I figured I'll add, from our experiences here, right? Which is, to your point, right? As we go from more of a smaller organization like an SMB into the mid market and up market, right? We've seen, for example, certainly some new technology tools that they need to bring to bear that sometimes we don't see in the smaller orgs is, for example, data quality management, as you see down there, right? Which is, you suddenly have to start thinking about acquiring data and making it operationalized, right, from multiple sources. So that becomes an interesting challenge, and putting that in place and plugging, those DQM tools into your CRM for data management, data quality management. The second thing, I think you called it out, which is intent data. These days, there's so many sources of intent data. So the ability to unify all the different intent sources and have a combined score or rank that you can then operationalize the intent data more in a streamlined way across your sales team, sales organization, something we've actually done some work around, and people find that super useful. The third area of innovation, I figured I'll call that out, that because I think folks may not know this, which is it's now possible to identify buyers directly on your website and web properties way beyond the company level data that was available maybe a year ago. There are new ways to generate more, call it, understand more of the behavioral data on buyers, buying groups, right? Companies visiting your site, making that more actionable. So delivering more actionable data for sales. And a lot of the innovation, Josh, we're certainly seeing right now with this new AI, machine learning, and so on, technologies that are coming in, is really around just, it's almost like a redux, right? We saw some of this a few years ago, but old is back, but now in a new form with new technology, new ways to do it even better. I'm thinking of things like lead scoring, the ability to rank order and prioritize the right leads for SDRs, BDRs to action, and sales organizations to go after, all the way from account tracking, account scoring through intent, to even down to the mention, comment on.
Oh, well, I take that again back to the journey, right? And you mentioned it, right? How do I action this data? How do I help sales understand what to make of an account or a buying team signal, right?
Right.
If they're on our website, what do I want to do about that? How do I send them an email? Do I flag it for a follow-up call? Does it depend on how many people of the buying team that I already have active in some way? And the sales has to say like, hey, I've got 3 out of the 8 people on the buying team doing something. I better call somebody and try to start moving this forward and making sure we're part of that consideration process. Just as marketing needs to help take this data that you mentioned and leverage it to surround that account, that buying team, with the right messages and the right channels at the right time. And that's where I think you can think through that pretty clearly and pretty quickly and actually leverage your orchestration tools, your data tools to make that happen.
Yeah. So I think, Josh, we have covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure we can go on.
Yes, we have.
We probably need to meet another time and then get into things we have not talked about. I'd love to talk to you about data warehouses versus CDPs versus all the new tools, whether it's a Snowflake or Databricks and so on, and how they come into play. That's one whole area to explore. Another thing would be omni-channel nurture, orchestration, nurture, what's the current state of the art. Some of the ABM platforms and tools can do some of it, but there's a lot of gaps there too from what we've seen. It's been a great conversation.
Pretty long conversations.
Appreciate it. We covered a lot of ground. Hopefully folks will find this useful. Again, this was our episode 3 of B2B pipeline growth series of LinkedIn live sessions. And I just want to quickly say thank you to stop my sharing. We come back on screen. And so it's been a great chat, Josh. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'll speak with you later.
Bye. Have a good day. Bye-bye.